The research vessel Odyssey of the Terran Union drifted silently in low orbit above Veltharion, the violet ocean world shimmering beneath two small suns like twin emeralds casting green-violet light. Beneath the endless surface of the water floated massive landmasses, resembling airborne islands connected by gigantic organic vines and living bridge networks. Lex stood close to the observation window, carefully examining the geological map displayed on the console. The soft glow of distant stars reflected against his sharp, angular features. His strong jawline and deep gray eyes radiated the intense focus of a seasoned field researcher. This was the first exploratory mission involving the Veltari civilization, a species spoken of in myths, famed for their mysterious enzyme symbiosis. Lex tightened the harness of his environmental suit and stepped into the transport bay. The ship landed softly atop the central floating landmass of Velshara, the airborne capital of the Veltari. As the hatch opened, pale violet mist swirled like thin silk, revealing a surreal vista. Towering spiral biostructures stretched skyward like silver-hued ancient trees. The ground itself seemed alive, gently pulsing as if breathing in harmony with the planet. Hundreds of Veltari stood in orderly rows awaiting them. They were tall, their luminous silver-violet skin glowing faintly under the strange sunlight. Soft tendrils trailing from behind their heads swayed rhythmically like sentient silk strands. Every motion they made conveyed elegance fused with absolute control. Lex descended with the tech escort team. His sharp gaze immediately picked out the figure standing at the forefront of the Veltari delegation. Sira. She stood noticeably taller than her kin, slender yet commanding. Her silver-violet skin sparkled under the twin suns, and her glowing golden eyes locked intensely onto him. Thin lips curled into the faintest of enigmatic smiles. Her form-fitting deep purple living garment hugged her frame, iridescent enzyme patterns softly flickering along her shoulders and back like strands of living electricity. Sira stepped forward, her tendrils extending slightly toward Lex in an almost cautious examination. Her voice, low and velvety, carried a tone of alien curiosity. "You come from Terran. I am Sira, High Representative of the Veltari. On behalf of our council, I welcome you to Veltharion." Lex gave a small respectful nod, his demeanor calm as ever. "I am Lex, lead bioresearch officer of the Terran Exploration Corps. It is an honor to be the bridge between our two species." As per Veltari custom, the alien host and first contact visitor were to perform the ancient joining ritual, a ceremonial enzyme exchange to establish peaceful intentions. Lex had been thoroughly briefed beforehand and had agreed to participate with the utmost caution. Sira stepped closer, stopping mere centimeters from him. Her breath carried a soft scent, part ozone, part exotic botanical resin. Her soft biotendrils gently brushed along Lex's forearm, creating a faint tingling sensation like static dancing across his skin. Then, following tradition, Sira bowed her head. Her long, slender fingers slowly traced the inside of Lex's wrist, right over the strong, pulsing vein. Almost instinctively, her soft tongue flicked briefly across the skin to sample his enzyme, just a fleeting contact to gather biological data. Instantly, Sira's eyes widened in disbelief. A violent surge of primal ecstasy exploded through her entire neural network, as if a shockwave of raw pleasure swept through every fiber of her being. Glowing strands of biolight erupted across her body. Her tendrils convulsed in chaotic spasms. Sira gasped, stumbling backward, instinctively clutching at her chest. Never before, in all of Veltari history, had a mere sampling of foreign enzyme triggered such a wild, overwhelming sensory cascade. She staggered, avoiding Lex's gaze, struggling desperately to suppress the incomprehensible surge of craving building deep inside her. Lex, sensing something was off, furrowed his brow but maintained his outward composure, unaware of what had just transpired. Sira quickly regained her posture, forcing her voice back to its usual smooth calm. "The ceremony is complete. I will now guide you to the Velshara Research Center. She deliberately kept her distance, avoiding any further contact. Yet as she turned to lead the way, she cast a furtive glance back at Lex, her mind swirling with confusion and overwhelming curiosity. A single question echoed in her thoughts. What are you? How could you have awakened the deepest, most primal instincts within me? Unbeknownst to Lex, in those fleeting seconds of skin-to-skin contact, he had unknowingly become the single most dangerous and most desired being in the galaxy for the Velthari species. They would soon be driven to obsession, willing to shatter every law and principle of their civilization just to taste again the perfect biological sample he carried. And the sweet nightmare was only beginning. The atmosphere of Velshara always seemed suspended between reality and illusion. Streams of glowing enzyme light drifted like miniature galaxies around the gently undulating living trees and the softly pulsing biotowers that resonated with the heartbeat of the planet. Lex followed Sira down smooth, winding corridors. The floors were woven with intricate strands of living fiber, like cosmic fingerprints underfoot. Shimmering clusters of violet and blue light pulsed from beneath the pathways as if guiding their steps. Lex wore his usual stoic expression, yet his mind raced, recording every nuance of this living ecosystem into his personal biological scanner. Every step he took on Veltharion was meticulously logged. Sira walked just a few steps ahead of him, her tall, graceful frame swaying like living silk. Yet Lex had no idea how much effort it took her to remain upright. Since tasting Lex's enzyme, Sira's body had been trapped in a strange dual state, violently awakened and yet tormented by a burning, unexplainable craving. From the instant the Terran enzyme touched her tongue, a biological chain reaction had erupted. Not only had it fused perfectly with her own biology, but it had supercharged the production of pleasure transmitters beyond anything recorded in Velthari evolutionary history. Sira, always the master of her instincts, always in control of every breath, every motion, now found herself adrift in a flood of biological desire, a mysterious fire consuming her from within. Her golden eyes, usually cold and unwavering, now glistened with turmoil as she subconsciously glanced back at Lex. The living enzyme scent emanating from Lex, completely imperceptible to him, acted like a dangerously addictive pheromone that drew her in, the compulsion growing stronger with each passing hour. At the heart of Velshara, Sira guided Lex to the Velnath Tower, the central nexus of Velthari science. Its walls shifted and rippled, changing organically as if they were alive and responding to unseen energy. Velthari scientists approached and greeted Lex with polite curiosity, but Lex quickly noticed something strange. Several of them began to lean closer than necessary, their tendrils extending toward him as if subconsciously attracted to an irresistible scent they could not understand. Sira stood silently apart, fear tightening every cell of her being. She alone fully understood the truth. The addiction had begun to spread. For the first time in history, the Veltari, a species that prided itself on absolute discipline, had been undone by something beyond logic, the enzyme of a Terran. The hunger could not be restrained by reason. It was the oldest primal instinct of their kind, encoded deep within their DNA over millions of years of evolution. Urgently, Sira led Lex away from the research center far sooner than planned. As they passed through the winding pathways back to the guest quarters, every Velthari they encountered stopped, their eyes burning with an almost predatory hunger. Lex, sensing the shift, furrowed his brow. His voice dropped to a low whisper. "Sira? Something's not right. I'm detecting abnormal biological signals from the Velthari near me." Sira merely nodded, her voice heavy with dread. "I know, and it terrifies me." Inside the guest chamber, dim violet light cloaked everything. Sira stood at the maximum distance she could manage, gripping her own arms tightly as she fought back the overwhelming biological urge. She knew if she touched him even once more, she might never regain control. What she did not know was that the reaction was already spiraling through the Velthari collective. From scientists to warriors to even the Elder Council itself, the hunger was spreading. The Velthari Council convened in emergency session. Biosensors had confirmed the horrifying reality. Lex was the source of the perfect Terran enzyme sample. Their ruling came swiftly and mercilessly. The Terran must be retained at any cost to ensure the survival of our species. Quietly, the Velcor capture team was activated, given just 24 hours to secure Lex and prevent him from leaving the planet. Back in the guest chamber, Sierra gazed at Lex through the soft haze of the living biowall. She knew what was coming. Deep within, her species' ancient instincts screamed to possess him, to claim him as theirs. Yet alongside that primal compulsion, another force burned equally strong. The terrifying fear of losing the first, and perhaps only being who had ever stirred her frozen heart with something beyond instinct. Love. And in the deep silent purple night, where only the rhythm of living enzyme harmonized with the beating of a Terran heart, Sierra made her decision. A choice that would change her destiny, and Lex's, forever. The sky over Veltarion sank into a deep violet hue as the planet's distinctive nightfall began to descend. Strands of enzyme light floated like glowing ribbons, their surreal beauty masking the looming danger creeping closer. In the heart of Velshara, Velcor enforcers in dark bio-armor moved silently, methodically sealing exits, one by one, as they prepared for a classified mission. The capture of Lex. At the topmost floor of the guest quarters, Lex remained unaware that he had become the hunted prey of an entire species. He stood motionless by the large observation window, his gaze absorbing the breathtaking view of the alien landscape, with the admiration of a scientist who could still be awed by nature's wonders. Yet deep inside, his honed survival instincts, those that had seen him through countless expeditions, were sounding a low, uneasy alarm. The door to the room slid open with force. Sierra entered, her expression more serious than he had ever seen. The tendrils behind her twisted tightly in tension, and the enzyme patterns along her skin flickered wildly out of sync. Lex, there's no more time. They've issued orders to apprehend you. If you don't leave now, you'll never get off Veltarion again. Her voice was rough, heavy with desperation, a command and a plea entwined as one. Lex turned, his gray eyes sharpening as they locked onto hers. It took only seconds for him to grasp the gravity of the situation. "And what about you?" he asked quietly. "You're betraying your own species, just to help me?" Sierra stepped closer, so close her breath, soft as silk, brushed against his skin, carrying with it the weight of her turmoil. "It's not just about helping. I can't let them have you. You don't understand, Lex. You are the only thing I refuse to share with anyone, even my own people." Those words and the wild, desperate blaze in her golden eyes stunned Lex. In that precarious moment, balanced between survival and destruction, he realized the undeniable truth. Between him and Sierra, something had formed that defied science, politics, and even the boundaries of species. Without another word, Lex seized Sierra's wrist tightly. "Let's go. I trust you." They bolted into the spiraling bio-corridors, with enzyme doors closing and reopening ahead of them, as if the living structure itself tried to delay their escape. Red-violet alert lights began to flash, and the dispassionate voice of Veltari security echoed through the halls. Alpha Terran target detected, initiating full lockdown of Velnath sector. Sierra yanked Lex into a narrow auxiliary passage reserved for high-ranking individuals, leading down into the underground biolayers. With each pounding step, enzyme lights surged behind them like a living storm. In the distance, the heavy, synchronized footsteps of Velcor soldiers and the activation hum of bioweapons reverberated through the living walls. They slipped through enzyme fluid conduits, crossed swinging living bridges suspended over yawning gaps where the icy violet wind cut against exposed skin. For the first time since setting foot on Veltharion, Lex truly felt the planet's deadly nature. Yet Sira's grip on his hand never faltered, grounding him against the chaos. Finally, they reached Veltis, the ancient, uncontrolled enzyme forest beyond the dominion of the floating cities. Giant living trees rose like colossal pillars of a forgotten temple. Enzyme tendrils drooped down to weave shifting tunnels of living light. Faint illumination seeped up from the deep violet earth, blanketing the forest in an otherworldly glow, as if they had stepped into another realm. They collapsed into a temporary shelter, formed by a hollowed-out enzyme pod. Lex gasped for breath, sweat glistening on his brow after hours of relentless flight. Sira leaned heavily against the living wall, clutching her chest, her radiant eyes never leaving him. Her skin blazed even brighter than before, and her tendrils twisted in visible agony under the merciless hunger gnawing at her being. "Lex." Her voice cracked, thick with urgency. I can't endure this anymore. My body, it demands I touch you. But if I do, I may never be able to let you go." Lex, though he had suspected something like this, was still struck by the raw, painful truth laid bare. He stepped closer, slowly but without hesitation. "Then let me choose," he said quietly. "You saved me. Now let me save you from this torment." He reached out, brushing his fingertips gently across her cheek. At that moment, Sira shuddered violently, her skin exploding in waves of enzyme light like a living biological storm. Yet instead of recoiling, Sira surged forward, throwing her arms around Lex in a searing embrace fueled by instinct deeper than thought. They toppled together onto the soft, pulsing bed of living enzyme, her body igniting with brilliant waves of light where it touched his. It was not merely the fulfillment of primal hunger. It was an undeniable, final affirmation. Even knowing they would be hunted, even knowing the pleasure would bind her irreversibly to him, Sira still chose to stay within Lex's arms. Beyond the shelter of the enzyme forest, the sound of Velcor pursuit grew closer. The hunt was far from over. But in the eye of the storm, there were only two beings, two souls from distant worlds, clinging to each other, trembling with passion and the fear of separation, vowing silently to protect one another, even against the wrath of an entire civilization. Dawn on Veltharion was unlike anything on any other world. Light from its twin suns filtered through towering enzyme canopies, transforming the ancient forest into a haunting sea of violet and pink. Yet amidst this alien beauty, Veltis had become the final arena for two fugitives hunted by an entire civilization. Lex and Sira emerged from their enzyme shelter as the first rays of light touched the living ground beneath their feet. Lex's gray eyes had hardened into full combat awareness, his senses razor-sharp, primal human survival instincts awakened. He was no longer just a scientist. He had become an unwilling warrior in Veltari's deadly hunt. Sira walked beside him, her silver-hued skin trembling faintly from the aftermath of her enzyme craving. Her biotendrils coiled tightly around her shoulders, her luminous golden eyes burning with resolve and pain. She knew that every step closer to Lex only worsened her addiction. Yet she could not bear to stray even a single step away. She had already forsaken her rank, her honor, and her future to stand at his side on this path of no return. Heavy footsteps echoed through the forest. From the high living walkways from the bio-walls, the Velcor had arrived. Over 20 Velthari warriors clad in dark enzyme armor, their tendrils sharpened into living blades, stood ready, radiating intense purple energy from their bodies. At their head stood Javel, the supreme commander, taller than any other, his dark gray skin nearly metallic, his void-like purple eyes devoid of emotion. Lex and Sira were completely surrounded. There was no escape. "Surrender the Terran," Javel's voice rasped across the air like cold steel against bare flesh. And you, Sira, will be forgiven. You will return to your place as a princess of the Velthari. Refuse, and I will take him by force. Sira stepped in front of Lex, arms wide, her body flaring with radiant enzyme light as if she would ignite herself before surrendering. No. Her voice shook with pain, yet held steady defiance. I will not allow anyone to touch him. No one has the right to turn him into a slave of Enzyme. Zavel advanced. The circle of Velcor tightened slowly. Lex gently pulled Sira back and whispered near her ear. Trust me. Lex crouched and quickly retrieved a small device from his utility belt, a reverse enzyme disruptor. A reckless plan he had devised during their long night hiding in the forest. He had recalibrated his own biological enzyme signature to emit a counter-frequency capable of disrupting the Velthari neural network. The device activated. A low-frequency enzyme pulse rippled out invisibly across the clearing. Every Velcor warrior staggered at once. Tendrils spasmed uncontrollably. The brilliant enzyme glow across their bodies flickered and sputtered chaotically. Several collapsed, trembling as if their own internal systems had turned against them. Javel roared in frustration, fighting the effects, but his dark eyes had already dulled, and disorder rippled violently through his biostructure. Lex gripped Sira's hand. Run! They sprinted toward a distant enzyme gorge, dodging through living walls still sparking wildly with residual energy. Behind them, the Velcor lay incapacitated, their neural systems momentarily disabled. At last, they reached the emergency landing zone of the Terran Union, where the battered Odyssey had been standing by, awaiting Lex's final signal. He transmitted the authorization to the orbiting tech command station. Sira gazed at Lex, her body still trembling from the disruptive blast. What did you just do? She whispered, equal parts fear and awe. Lex wiped the sweat from his brow, his expression cold but calm. I did what humanity has always done, refused to become a slave to any system, whether biological, political, or alien. Sira chuckled weakly through labored breaths, then looked at him with deep adoration. You truly are unlike any being I've ever known, and that is exactly why I can never stop craving you. The Odyssey's engines roared to life in the violet twilight, but Veltarion was not finished with them. A wave of enzyme assault craft was already racing in from the eastern horizon. Lex tightened his grip on Sira's hand. We're not done yet. If we want real freedom, there's one more step. Ahead lay the final battle for their survival. Both knew that whether human or Velthari, only true love and the will to survive could ever defy destiny itself. The roar of Velthari enzyme warships shook the thick violet air of the primeval Veltis forest. On the living landing platform, the battered Odyssey of the Terran Union anxiously awaited Lex's final signal. Blinding purple search beams from pursuing ships slashed across the sky like deadly blades, slicing through drifting enzyme mist that hovered close to the ground. Lex and Sira raced between towering enzyme columns, their heartbeats synchronized with each desperate step as they fled from what felt like certain doom. Even knowing the odds were nearly hopeless, they didn't stop. Lex's hand gripped Sira's wrist tightly, holding her close as if letting go for even a moment would cause her to vanish into the swirling biological nightmare that surrounded them. At last, they reached the Odyssey. Lex activated the launch sequence. Status lights flickered from red to green. But before they could board, Javel, the commander they had temporarily disabled, reappeared, recovered, and leading the remaining Velcor enforcers. The ground itself trembled under the advancing warriors. Lex stepped between Sira and their attackers. His body was exhausted, yet his will was unbreakable, sharp as forged steel. Javel issued his final ultimatum. You will not leave. The Veltari species requires your enzyme to survive. If you refuse to surrender, we will destroy your vessel. Sira stepped forward, her golden eyes blazing with fierce light. You are wrong. Our species has survived millions of years without Terran enzymes. We do not need to enslave another being to continue. She turned to Lex, her fingers trembling as they brushed the enzyme disruptor still clipped to his belt. "There is a way," she whispered. "Broadcast a full reverse-frequency pulse into Valterion's enzyme network. It will reset the entire system to neutral. The addiction will end, and no one will have a reason to hunt you again." Lex stared deeply into her eyes. He understood the cost. It would sever every symbiotic bond their species had cultivated over eons. Valtharion would have to rebuild its biological foundation from scratch. But it was the only way. He gently placed his hand over hers and nodded. Raising the device, Lex entered the final activation code. A powerful anti-enzyme wave erupted, invisible yet cataclysmic, sweeping across Valtharion like a silent explosion. The colossal enzyme trees blazed brilliantly for a heartbeat, then darkened abruptly. Tendrils recoiled and slowly turned translucent, inert and harmless. The Velcor warriors collapsed where they stood. The biolight faded from their skins, their once hypnotized eyes returning to normal. Javel stood frozen, stunned for the first time, his iron-hard face twisting into disbelief and helplessness. Sierra turned toward Lex, her luminous eyes now clear, free from the hunger that had tormented her. "You did it," she whispered. "You freed them, and you freed me." Without hesitation, Lex grabbed Sierra's hand, and together they sprinted up the living staircase into the ship. The Odyssey's system confirmed their clearance. Engines engaged, launch countdown in 10, 9, 8. As the vessel soared upward, piercing the violet atmosphere of Valtharion, Sierra gazed silently down at the world below. Her eyes shimmered with a mixture of love, sorrow, and release. Lex stood beside her, gently resting his hand on her back, feeling the warmth of skin that no longer flared with unstable enzyme energy. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Sierra smiled for the first time since they had met, a real smile, unburdened by walls or fear. "I am, because I still have you." She leaned her head against his shoulder, the two of them fitting together like the final pieces of a puzzle finally at peace. Outside the ship's viewport, the black infinity of space unfolded around them. Far in the distance, clusters of stars glittered like scattered diamonds across velvet. Lex whispered, a vow meant only for her ears. "No matter where we go, I will never let anyone take you away, and I will never belong to anyone but you." Sierra tightened her grip on Lex's hand, her soft tendrils curling lovingly around his wrist like a final, gentle claim. "And I will never share you, not ever." The Odyssey slipped into orbit around Valtharion and vanished into the endless void. The tale of a Terran scientist and a Veltari princess ended there, with no more hunters, no more chains, only freedom and love between two beings from the most distant corners of the stars.